Welcome to another creature tutorial. This is a very popularly requested tutorial by quite a few of our users where they want to know general advice on using creature to animate a humanoid character. And of course, as you probably noticed, I have quite a few videos on my site and on YouTube where I do show you how to animate humanoid characters, but those are all rather basic. And this tutorial is for users who already just sort of know the basics but want to really get into it and actually utilize the power of creature's procedural motor system to do the fancier effects. Like you wanted to sort of know, like, how do we do fancy flesh or cloth or hair or any drooping slime on a bipedal character, and what are the general tips that you would like to know regarding, say, meshing the body parts of the character or placing the rig and all that sort of thing. So this is what this tutorial is for. If you want a more basic tutorial, please look at on the other tutorials of the site. But let's get going. Okay, so this is an amazing piece of art by OTK Games of their zombie character. In case you didn't know, they have an upcoming game that's already on Steam Greenlight called The Vagrant. It's a hack and slasher / RPG side scroller which looks amazing, and they have actually allowed me to use this sample art piece for this demo. Okay, so I like to say thank you OTK Games, and please check out their amazing game called Vagrant when you have time. I think you guys will love it, and it's a great demonstration of what creature can do in a first top quality title. Okay, so this is their zombie character. This is actually their character over here, and the project actually animates the zombie, and it does it in a very dynamic way. You will see that the arms are moving very fluidly. The legs are, of course, walking, but in a sort of limp fashion, like what a zombie should be. And in addition to that, you're going to see the flesh actually moving in a very natural way, using physics and soft body dynamics motors, and the slime is going to wiggle about, and also the cloth on the sleeves are also going to move about in a very natural fashion. Okay, so how do we accomplish all those effects? Well, if that's what you want to learn, watch this tutorial. So to start off, you notice that the body parts are of course all separated out in a texture or sprite sheet, right? And the meshes are relatively in a medium in terms of density. They're of medium density. Now if you want to do dynamic flesh and cloth, please take note that you do need a certain amount of points or triangles in your meshes, okay? Because we do want high quality deformation, and if your meshes are too coarse, then the physics solver isn't going to be able to resolve a lot of the detail, and so it will run really quickly too, because you have very few triangles, but you're not going to get the detail and the quality. Okay, but you shouldn't go too dense either, otherwise it might slow to a crawl. So something like this, like medium density, is fine, right? And generally what I do is you probably mesh around an 80 by 80 resolution, or you can go for like 100 by 100. That's what I recommend. Okay, so you have these body parts meshed out. Okay, that's great. Let's go to the rig and let's take a look. Okay, so it's all put together. It's pretty simple. Now, the bones are actually not that complicated. If you notice, for the legs, you just have basically 3 bones, right, that IK can operate on. And for the arms, you really just have 2 bones. Yeah, so 2 bones, and then maybe just around here at the fingers if you want to do some kind of interesting finger motion. Now, what's interesting about this rig is I actually have, so obviously you have the spine. So I have 3 bones running up from the torso or the spine all the way to the head, right? And I actually want the slime. So let me show you. So I want the slime of the zombie to actually move about dynamically while he's moving with physics. So of course I'm going to have bones. Let me actually make the bones smaller so you can actually see this clearer. Okay, so I want the slime. I want the slime of the character to move in a slimy fashion dynamically, naturally too. So of course I'm going to have a chain of bones running down. Okay, so other than that, it's a pretty simple rig. And what's going to bring this character to life, even though it's a zombie, is actually all the procedural motors. Okay, so let's hop right into the animate mode and let's take a look. Oh, and by the way, before I continue, the weighting on this character was all done in auto weighting mode. I highly, highly, highly recommend use auto weighting. I cannot emphasize this enough. If you're going to do manual weighting, go ahead and do it. I would use manual weighting when I want to finesse certain regions, but in general, when you start weighting any character, even a very complex character, always do auto weighting first. It runs a pretty sophisticated algorithm that results in very, very good weight distribution. It's going to give you really nice shapes and curves, and then you can go in and finesse them with manual weighting. And even auto weighting itself, you can actually do a lot of finessing. You can actually mess around with the radius of the auto weighting. You can mess around with the influence. You can watch the other tutorial videos I have on fixing rigging errors. I might do a new one as well, since I've added quite a few debugging features. But you can actually do a lot of manual adjustment as well in the auto weighting mode per bone. So I would, again, highly recommend anybody using creature to use the auto weighting tool first before you switch to manual weighting. It's just going to give you much higher quality results. Okay? Alright, so with that, let's go to the animate mode. Alright, so let's take a look. Let me turn off the bones. Let's take a look at how the zombie moves. Let me loop it. So it's pretty cool, actually. If you notice this, let me zoom in. It's looping. You see the sleeves over here. Look at that. It's amazing, right? It looks basically like cloth, which is exactly how cloth should behave. It's moving naturally like cloth. And obviously, you didn't do any real keyframing there. It's just run by Creature's soft body physics motors, and that's what it's basically doing. And I talked about slime. Look at how naturally it's flowing down the mouth of the character. So that too is also based off the procedural motor system. Actually, the whole thing is based off the procedural motor system. The legs, the arms and the legs, sorry, are all run with the IK rotate motor. Some variants of it, either the smooth IK rotate or the IK rotate motor. Okay, and even the belly. That's also another soft body physics motor going on. Okay, so let's break it down one by one and see what's going on. Let's start with the feet. All right, so the feet are done with the smooth IK rotate motor. Okay, if you go install motor, you'll notice there is a smooth IK rotate motor. And okay, so before I continue, I get questions too about the different IK rotate motors, right? Because you noticed in Creature, there are two kinds of IK rotate motors. There's the IK rotate motor, obviously, and then there is the smooth IK rotate motor. And the question normally goes about this way. It's like you have two kinds of IK rotate motors that basically accomplish sort of the same thing. They're useful for walk cycles or any kind of rotational targeting motion, right? Mostly walk cycles, but other things as well. Which one do I choose? Well, and are there any restrictions? Well, I'm happy to tell you that both in Creature and IK, there are no restriction on the number of joints you can apply IK to, which is pretty cool. Unlike other systems where you're just limited to 2 bones, so you can apply that to any number of bones. However, the smooth IK version is going to be way more stable. In fact, there's almost no popping at all for any number of bones. You can have n number of bones and it will just behave very, very smoothly. Hence the term smooth IK rotate motor. However, the downside of it is that it might not be as accurate as the IK rotate motor, as in the joints, the targeting of joints, the intermediary joints of the smooth IK rotate motor might intersect one another, which in theory sounds bad, right? But in practice, let me just play this. Look at how naturally this leg moves. This is done with the smooth IK rotate motor. And if I turn on the bones, you notice that, look at this, the joints are going, the bones are going into themselves, right? But actually, because of the advanced weighting system of Creature, a lot of these issues are actually resolved. So what my advice to you is, when you start doing automated walk cycles, you should try the smooth IK version first and see what results it gives you. And if those results aren't acceptable, then you can switch to the regular IK rotate version. But you can go back and forth and decide what's good for you. Okay? But let's examine this right leg, a screen right leg first, and see what it's like. So I have a smooth IK rotate motor, and you notice what's interesting is I've obviously shaped this targeting curve. Right? That's the beauty of the IK rotate motor. You can actually shape it. It doesn't have to be a circle. You can shape it. And the way I've shaped it is I've obviously changed these parameters on the right over here. And what have I actually changed, right? So I've set the height to 2. Okay, so that just uniformly scales it by 2 in the y direction. But the way I shaped it, the way I lopped off the top part of the shape is I set the scale top. You see this? Scale top. it says the scaling factor on the top half of the arc. I set the scale top to 0.1. Okay, so that lops off the top part. Okay, I've also made the right side longer and the left side, the left half, shorter. And how do I do that? Well, it's simple. It's just scale left. I set the scale left of this guy to 0.5. Okay, and the scale right is still set to 1. So 0.5 means the left half of this arc is going to get scaled by 0.5. So obviously it becomes a lot shorter, and so that's why it's stretched to the right. And I want that because, let me play the animation again. I want that because I want the leg of the zombie to be stretching more to the right. I want it to pull more to the right and less to the left. That's how I've done. And I also want the top part to be less. I don't want the leg to lift that much because I'm animating a limping motion. I however, do want the leg to span the full, the bottom half. I do want to span the bottom half. And that is why the scale bottom over here is set to 1. Okay, so with these parameters, actually, it's very powerful. You can really shape the arc you want to target. It doesn't have to be a circle. In fact, it's mostly never a circle. You probably have some kind of irregular arc that you want to target to have realistic motion. Okay, so that is the screen right leg. Now let's look at the screen left leg. So the screen left, again, is another smooth IK rotate motor. But then, look at this shape now. This is different from the right leg, right? The right leg was like this, curved downwards, and this is curved upwards. And you can probably guess what I've done here, right? So again, the scale right, I've set it to 2, so it stretches all the way to the right, okay? And the scale left is 1. So now the right side is twice as long as the left side, yeah? And the scale top, I've set it to 0.8, so slightly upwards. And the bottom is lopped off, 0.2, right? So it's very, very minimal. I still have some kind of minimal curve. So with that, you can basically get this walking motion, okay? And of course, the last most important part of the walking motion is you have to make the two motors out of sync or out of phase, right? That is, there has to be some overlap. That's what I mean by that. So in other words, the phase determines the overlap of the motor. So this phase, the screen right leg, the phase is 0. Okay, you notice that's 0. Now screen left, the phase is 1.5. So it's displaced. And this means that when it actually moves, right, they move in alternate forms, right? They alternate, and that's how walking motion is. It's always alternate. You have a left foot in, it goes back, and then right foot comes out, right? Alternate motions, very, very important. The other thing about phases is that I want to let you know is that they work in conjunction with the speed, okay? So the speed of both these motors is -2, right? You have to make sure, if you want a perfectly out of sync motion, like a walking cycle, you have to make sure that both of these legs, or both the motors, have the same speed, okay? So if this guy is -2, all right, this guy also needs to be -2, okay? Very important. Otherwise, you won't get a perfectly out of sync motion, all right? Okay, so we have the legs done. Let's move on to the other parts of the body. Let's take a look at the arms now. All right. So notice for the arms, remember I talked about the difference between the smooth IK rotate motor and the IK rotate motor. So for the arms, I need a bit more accuracy. I actually don't want the joints to interpenetrate. So, but I still want some kind of rotational targeting motion. So I've gone ahead and used the IK rotate motor to accomplish that. Okay. So see, it's perfectly aligned and there's no interpenetration. Okay. Now for the other arm, let's see what I used. The other arm I used a smooth IK version. Okay, so notice how I switch back and forth between them depending on what I'm going for, what kind of look I'm going for. And I would recommend you do the same thing as well. You can try both the smooth version and the regular version and see which one fits for your animation. That's what I would recommend. And the same trick is applied here for the arms. I have them out of phase. So this is at phase 1 for this arm, and the other arm I have at phase 0. Okay, so that's how they're out of phase. Yeah? Okay, so that's actually a really simple part. That's the super simple part. Let us take a look at something fancier, which you never expected. Remember I talked about the spine earlier? I have like 3 bones running through this character, a spine, right? And why did I do that? Well, obviously I wanted to do it for animation. And one of the interesting things about any bipedal humanoid character, or actually any character in general, is you want it to feel alive. You want to feel that it has a sense of some more dynamics in the character. And when a character is moving, typically speaking, you actually want the limbs, or sorry, the joints to sort of flow with the motion as it moves along, right? And obviously you can manually animate it with FK. That's one option if you allow time. The other option is if you have a spine going through a character, what I recommend, you could try this, is you actually put a pin rope motor on 3 of these guys over here. Okay, 3 of these guys have a pin rope motor running through them. So what is a pin rope motor? So a pin rope motor is essentially a directable rope, but it's more than just a directable rope because it's a very fancy rope physics system. It's not your simple regular rope object. So what it allows you to do is it runs a physics rope through this, but at the same time you can actually make the rope preserve its bending angle. In other words, it preserves its bending energy. So imagine it's a rope, but you can actually make it not like a free-flowing rope. Although if you want to do that, it's fine. But if you want to make the rope actually preserve its shape and sort of snap back, that's what a pin rope motor is. The other cool thing about pin rope motor is you can also direct it. That's pretty cool, right? So this means that you can basically set a targeting point of the rope, okay? And then the rest of the joints will fall into place, and they'll try to target that point. So imagine it's like a rope that preserves its bending angles, and you can target that. You can actually key this over time, okay? And the cool thing about this is because it's all based off pure physics, is that the entire system will just flow naturally with the targeting point. So right here, and oh yeah, before I continue, you notice that I have a base bone over here, right, with a move bounce motor. So any humanoid character, when you are a bipedal or even quadruped character, if you want any kind of gait, I always have a root bone, bone 0, at the base, where I put a move bounce motor to make it bounce about. Okay, and this drives the entire character. This makes a character sort of have a more of a keep alive motion, okay, for walking or running. Okay, but this is the general driver of this motion. And then above that, I have these guys, right? I have these guys with a pin rope motor going through them. And I've set this as a targeting point. So it's going to target this point, but everything else in between, I'm going to let physics handle it. So notice how it flows. It almost like bounces and flows in a very subtle but natural way. And that's the most difficult motion to achieve. Not the very obvious motions, but the very subtle but dynamic flowy motions are what physics motors excel at. And so if you want to do something similar, I recommend you creating a spine through a character, like 3 bones, and then putting a pin rope motor through 3 of those bones and targeting a single point. And it will just work. It will just work very naturally, and you'll get very natural motion without too much effort. You notice even like sort of animates the flesh over here, right? That's all done with the pin rope action, okay? So that's an important tip. Okay, now let's talk about the mouth of the zombie. The mouth of the zombie is opening and closing. I have chosen not to animate the upper jaw because I think it looks fine. But what I've done is I've actually put a rotate cycle motor. This is a motor that will basically rotate up and down, a bone up and down between 2 different angles. Okay, so I want it more subtle. So I have the start angle at -20 and the end angle at 0. So it basically goes from -20 up to 0 degrees, right? So it opens and closes the jaw. That's really all it does, and it does a pretty good job, okay? But that's not the main part of this exercise. The main part of this exercise is to get the jaw actually to drive the slime, which is what I talked about just now, right? Remember that? So again, I have these bones coming out down here for the slime, right? And for these 3 bones, I have actually put in a bend physics motor on them, okay? And so this will allow them to basically execute bend physics naturally while driven by that moving jaw. The other important thing you need to know about using the bend physics is in general, you should go for the motion mode. There are 2 modes, stability and motion. Stability is default because it's always very stable, so your stuff wouldn't freak out. But if you want interesting motion, I highly recommend you switch to the motion mode, okay? And you set appropriate parameters for damping and stiffness. I have another tutorial going on about that, but in general, what I would say is that for every increase in stiffness, if you want to make your material stiffer, you should also increase damping by about the same factor, okay? Otherwise, the system will become unstable. So that's what I would recommend. Now, if we play it without the bones, you will see that the slime actually naturally flows, right? And that's due to the bend physics getting driven by the mouth, the rotate cycle motor of the character. Okay, that's how that effect is achieved, all right? So that actually concludes all the settings for the bone animation part of the character, okay? And are we done? We're not done yet. Okay, so that's just the bone part. So you're probably asking now, okay, fine, but how's the other stuff achieved? Like, you know, this cloth, actually just the cloth, how is that done? Well, that is not done with the bones, because bone animation can deform meshes, but in a limited way. For that, we would switch to the more advanced portion of Creature, which is the regions motor. And this is where the cool stuff really happens. Okay, so the region motors or mesh motors actually operate directly on the meshes of the character, as opposed to the bones, which operate on, of course, the bones, right? And through bone motors, you actually put motors on bones and then they influence the regions. And the other way to do it is just to affect the regions directly, and that's the cool thing about it. Now, of course, you can do many kinds of mesh manipulations in Creature. You can directly manipulate the mesh, doing some kind of freeform deformation. We have tons of motors to do that, as a cage motor, control points motors. Those are the key points directly, if you want to do that. But the real power of Creature is obviously the procedural system, so you can use the physics motor. This actually runs a pretty advanced soft body physics pass on the mesh or the region you've selected, okay? And it's very powerful, as I'm going to demonstrate. So let's take a look at one of the sleeves here. Okay, I've selected the sleeves. Let's see, maybe this guy. Yeah, this guy over here. Okay, so what does it actually do? Well, if you install a physics motor, it says deform the mesh using soft body physics, right? So once you've installed it, and if you play it, it's going to drop to the ground on gravity, and you're going to be very, very disappointed. So you're probably asking, what am I supposed to do? Well, you have to configure this motor, of course. So select this guy, and I'll click Edit Motor. So look at this. Look at this. This is a sleeve of the character, right? And look at these white points over here. Okay, what does that mean? The white points are basically the points that are glued to follow animation. In other words, they're going to actually track the animation perfectly. They're not going to have any sort of dynamics or minimal soft body dynamics, okay? And then the rest of the sleeve, you notice, are all completely free of white, which means they're free to execute their really cool physics motion, okay? So what's really cool about this scheme is that it allows you to glue certain parts of the mesh to make it target animation, and then you can let the rest of the mesh just freely do whatever physics tells it to do, okay? And to actually glue stuff, you basically switch to this glue mode. It's on by default. You just paint it like a paintbrush thing. You just paint it like painting weights, okay? And then if you want to remove stuff, switch to remove, and then remove portions of the mesh, okay? That's all it is. Now there's additional settings on soft body physics. You can radius just change the radius of this brush, yeah, so that's whatever. Now flexibility actually determines how flexible this material is. The default setting is actually okay, but if you pull it all the way to the right, it's going to swing around about really erratically, like a really loose piece of cloth. Obviously, stiffness also has something to do with it, but flexibility is a more drastic change. Okay, so in general, I'll leave it as a low setting, but you should experiment to see what you can get. All right. Now, so it's actually a really simple motor to use, and it's extremely powerful. I want to emphasize it, very powerful. Once you put a mesh deformed physics motor on it and you start gluing the regions over, what you then do is you just put in appropriate values for damping and stiffness. And here I have 30 and 500. I set it pretty low because I want it to be free-flowing like cloth. See that? So I can try a couple of things. If I set it to, let's say, 10,000, for example, it's going to be, you see it's stiffer now. It doesn't flow as much, right? So that's what stiffness does. So if I set it back to 500, this is going to, there you go, flow a lot more freely. So depending on what you're trying to animate, if you want to animate flesh, for example, you probably want a higher degree of stiffness. You probably want something like 2,000 or 3,000, okay? And if you want something like cloth, you set something like 500. And if it's flesh, what you want to do is you probably also want to go in and actually paint the interior regions like it's like a bone structure and leave the exterior regions free to deform. That's actually how flesh is done in visual effects, okay? So that's my general tip for you, and that's how these pieces of cloth were done. They were all done with the mesh deformed physics motor. And if you take a look at this part here as well, that too was done with the mesh deformed physics motor. And if you take a look at the motor configuration, notice I painted the upper edge boundaries of the cloth to be white, so they're glued and they target animation, and the bottom part is free to flow. Okay, free to go. Sorry. And there you go. Yeah. Okay, so let's look at the whole zombie in its entire form. and appreciate the procedural motor system for what it is. It's a very, very powerful system. So you notice all the dynamic cloth going on there, and the belly is moving very naturally as well. And we have the rope physics going through the system, so that gives a touch more fluidity to the motion. So the whole thing just comes together really, really nicely. Okay? Alright, so thank you for watching this tutorial and have fun animating.